Good morning. Good morning, Ohio. It's James Lewis of the Grueling Truth Radio Network here with Caitlin Murray. Caitlin is the author of the national team inside story of women who've changed soccer. So, Caitlin, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, what inspired the book?
Well, the U.S. Women's National Team, for anyone who maybe tunes in during the Women's World Cup, they know that the U.S. Women's National Team is a dominant team. They have had tons of success over the years. They've won 3 World Cups, multiple gold medals at the Olympics. They are a team worthy of a book like this, a book that is a deep dive into their history. You know, I interviewed like 100 people, players, coaches, various people, and their full story had never been told before. So that's really what this book is about. It's how the team started, how they were able to be so successful, and a lot of off-the-field stuff. Them fighting for equal pay, them fighting for better treatment, which is also a big part of the story that probably isn't talked about as much when, you know, we think about the history of the team. So they deserved it. So no one had done it before. No one had written this book before. So me and my publisher decided I would be the first.
Excellent. Is it fair to say they are probably one of the most successful dynasties in all of sports?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely made that argument before. It's certainly different when you think of, like, the Golden State Warriors or something. They're playing every year. They're playing in a league. I mean, this is international soccer, so I think that actually makes the dominance of the U.S. Women's National Team more impressive because they've done it over such a long span of time. I mean, the team started in 1985, and they have pretty much generally always been ranked number one in winning, you know, trophies throughout the years. So I would say so. I wouldn't even quantify it as one of the best women's teams. I wouldn't quantify it as one of the best soccer teams. I think they are just one of the best teams in the world.
With that, yeah, obviously they've drawn amazing ratings and massive crowds. Is any of that the response to the patriotism, or is it more so just the quality of the team and the quality of the players you feel?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think there are probably a few reasons. I mean, number one, Americans love winners, and this team wins. So, you know when you tune in, there's a good chance you won't be too disappointed. So I'm sure that's part of it. I also think that the players on the team have really charismatic personalities, and you know, if I were to compare it to the U.S. men's national team, you know, no disrespect to those guys, they aren't the most interesting interviews. Where on the women's side, you know, these players really let their personality show. They're very relatable. And, you know, in soccer, the best players are being paid hundreds of millions of dollars. They make so much money. They are so famous. They are so untouchable. On the women's side, it's not really like that. I mean, these players, some of them are compensated quite well, but the women are just a lot more relatable, a lot more human, and I think that makes it easier to root for them as well.
Exactly. They still kind of have that feeling they know where they come from and that they still appreciate the fans, where, like you said, some other athletes, once you get so high up there, it's kind of hard to still relate.
Yeah, I mean, it is not rare to go to a U.S. Women's National Team game and see the players out there signing autographs with fans for like an hour afterward. I mean, I don't know if on the men's side they always do that. I think they, you know, want to get back to the locker room. But the women really know that the fans are why they have the success that they have, and they want to give back to the fans and, you know, be grateful to the fans.
they've been able to draw such great revenue for FIFA and for Team USA, but they don't get it distributed equally or fairly sometimes. Why is that?
Well, I mean, in relation to FIFA, sexism is one answer, and FIFA has a history of sexism and not treating the Women's World Cup as well as it should be treated based on, the amount of money they do get from the Women's World Cup. And, that's a whole issue. FIFA has a lot of problems. With U.S. Soccer, the federation that, is essentially the boss of the U.S. Women's National Team, I think it's something that has been changing over the years. Certainly in the early days, I think that U.S. Soccer didn't really know what to do with a women's team or why it mattered. And over the years, I think the value of the U.S. women's team has become obvious, and U.S. Soccer is making changes and getting better. But I think it's just when you do something a certain way for so long, when you're kind of entrenched in, maybe valuing the men's team more, it takes longer to kind of shift the way you approach things. I know U.S. Soccer is trying, and I know that the U.S. Women's National Team, the players filed a lawsuit last month alleging gender discrimination against U.S. Soccer. So these are conversations that are continuing. In the past, I'm sure it was true that the U.S. Men's National Team brought more value to the federation, but the women's team has actually brought in more revenue over the last few years. So that should definitely start to be shifting more and more.
Exactly. Yeah, it should be. Yeah, it should be based on, like you said, what you're bringing to the table, as opposed to antiquated gender lines. Now, with the is this is the year for the World Cup, correct?
Yeah, it's this summer in June in France.
Nice. So, kind of handicap that. Who do you feel? Obviously the USA women's team is going to be strong again, but what other teams should they be concerned about?
Yeah, the U.S. women won in 2015, so they're the defending champions, and they're, of course, favorites again. I would definitely be nervous about France, the host country. France, I think, player for player, at least in their starting 11, might be the best team in the whole World Cup. They will be the hosts, which home field advantage tends to give teams a boost. And the way the bracket has shaped out, the U.S. could end up facing France in the quarterfinal. If that were to happen, I mean, that's essentially a World Cup final level game happening in a quarterfinal. So if that happens, I would be pretty nervous for the U.S. and their chances of making it out. Germany is another team that is very, very good. I believe they're ranked number 2 in the world right now, behind the U.S., and again, because of the way the bracket shaped out, it looks like it will either be France in the quarterfinal or Germany against the U.S. So that would be another huge game that, again, I would be nervous if I was the U.S. And whenever the U.S. and Germany face each other, whoever wins that game goes on to win the World Cup. That's happened 3 times now. So those are the 2 teams I would watch, but for anyone listening who they don't follow women's soccer, they want to know what other teams to watch, definitely keep an eye on England. They've been good. Australia has been really good, although they fired their coach like 3 months ago, so that's weird. So we'll see how that turns out. Maybe Sweden is an interesting team to watch as well.
With soccer, at least the men's, the better players on the men's team tend to go overseas to play. With having the National Women's Soccer League, are we going to see more of the Team USA players staying at home and playing in that league?
Yeah, actually, every player on the U.S. Women's National Team plays in the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League, and there are different leagues around the world. Like in France, the Women's League there has a lot of the best players in the world, but there are really only 2 teams that are really good, Lyon and Paris Saint-Germain. And in the NWSL, every team is good. You never really know who's going to win week to week. So there are debates about, like, what is the best women's league in the world. The NWSL, which is where all the American players play, definitely has the most parity and is the most competitive in that sense. So the Americans are playing here. It'll be interesting to see after the World Cup when maybe the players don't have to be stateside to prepare for the tournament. If some of them do go overseas, where some of these clubs that are powerhouses in the men's game have a ton of money and pay their women's players very well. So, we might see some movement from some Americans after the World Cup, but right now they're all in the NWSL. So, for people in cities with NWSL teams, you can, go and see the Americans play.
What about those cities that don't have the teams? Any chance there's going to be a tour or expansion in the league?
Yeah, there have been a lot of discussions about expansion. Mia Hamm is a part owner of Los Angeles FC, which is a new soccer team in LA, and she has talked about wanting to get an NWSL team in Los Angeles. I think that's a matter of when, not if, and, the NWSL doesn't have a team in California at this point, and they really need to expand there because they have a few East Coast teams. They've two on the West Coast, one in Portland, one in Tacoma, Washington, but they really need to expand their footprint. So I would expect to hear that the league is going to be expanding to Los Angeles in the next couple years. But yeah, I think expansion is the goal. That's important for the longevity of the league, because the NWSL is still a young league. It's only a few years old, still growing, and it needs to keep expanding.
Yeah, I was going to say, I retract my complaint. I was going to complain we don't have a team in Ohio, but if California doesn't have a team, well, okay, I get it now. Yeah, because, that's definitely one of the places you need to have a team. Yeah. Yeah,
well, you have a couple MLS teams, so
that's true.
Cincinnati has been doing really well, getting huge crowds. The Columbus Crew, they were gonna move, they haven't. They're still there. Yeah, so I think what we've seen in the NWSL is a lot of times it is MLS teams that are introducing women's teams to their club. So, if Cincinnati or Columbus were to add women's teams, that would be great for the NWSL. And the national team has played in Cincinnati, the U.S. women's national team, and they've gotten big crowds. So, I think Cincinnati is definitely a possibility down the road.
Definitely, yeah. And the nice thing is with the FC Cincinnati, they have recently started building a new stadium that's mostly for soccer, so they definitely could use a second tenant, because they're going to have a lot of open dates for such a huge, massive building.
Yeah, and we'll see how the designs change as they actually have to build it, but the renderings that they put out of the stadium look really cool too. So, I think people are going to want to go watch games there.
So tell us about how you're able to get such access to the players, the coaches, and get them to share that inside information with them or with you.
Well, I think for the players who, played on the team in the 90s or whatever, they don't get a ton of interview requests now. I'm sure they did when they were playing, but now it was really me being persistent, because I did have trouble getting people to talk to me, especially former players who aren't used to dealing with the media on a regular basis anymore. I really had to be very persistent, to the point where I felt sort of annoying. But if someone didn't say, if someone said no to me, I respect that. They do not have to talk to me for my book and move on. But if someone didn't say no to me, I had to keep trying. And, that worked. Eventually, former players said yes. And for current players, I was able to speak to some of them one-on-one for the book. Fortunately, I had access to some of them. For others, maybe I would be working on another article, and I would be able to talk to them for that, so that I'd, ask them a few book questions if they were cool with it. So it was kind of just multitasking, being persistent, and luckily, I've covered women's soccer for a while. I've had, writing in the New York Times, The Guardian, ESPN, Fox Sports. So some of them may have been familiar with my writing and the fact that I've covered the team for a while. So I wasn't just, dropping in and dropping out, and I wasn't some random person. So that always helps as well.
Definitely. Yeah, exactly. I mean, having that great experience, having that track record with him, I can imagine definitely paints you in a more positive light when you're asking those intense and deep questions. So with the book, now, a lot of people would look at the book and they go, oh, it's a sports book. But it's more than that, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a sports story. I mean, there's a lot of, recap. Well, not a lot, but, I recap soccer games. I talk about the team winning certain tournaments and what that was like, and talk to the players for their perspective of, what they were thinking on the field or whatever. But a lot of it is off-the-field stuff. It's sitting in a boardroom with the president of U.S. Soccer and threatening to quit because U.S. Soccer wasn't treating the players well enough. It's a lot of, dealing with lawyers and contract negotiations and demanding equal pay and better treatment and all these other things. So it's a sports book. I would say it's also, a book about equality and kind of the women's movement and those sorts of things. I've had a lot of feedback from, fathers who have enjoyed the book and have given the book to their daughters, and their daughters love reading it. I mean, it's just an inspiring story of, women succeeding and also sports history. I mean, whether you watch women's soccer or not that much, there's no denying that the U.S. women's national team is one of the best teams in the history of sports. So their history hasn't really been fully detailed. So, I mean, this is a history book about the team and what they went through.
Excellent. I'd like to thank our guest today, Caitlin Murray, for being on the show. She's the author of The National Team, The Inside Story of Women Who Changed Soccer. Before we let you go, where should they follow you on social media, the web, or they want to read more of your work?
Yeah, the best place is my Twitter. It's Caitlin Murr, CaitlinMurr. You can go there. I always tweet out all my stories. If you want more information about the book, you can go to uswntbook.com. That stands for U.S. Women's National Team. uswntbook.com. It'll have all the links to the various retailers. I mean, the book is in Barnes & Noble, so I'm sure people can get it there. It's on Amazon, but go to that website, and all the links are there.
That is awesome. Thank you, Caitlin, and we greatly appreciate you being on the show.
Great. Thanks for your time.